Okay, this is Mitch for Indigenous Insights, Eagle Radio's weekly Anishinaabe radio program. On the line from the Bay Mills Community College. Well, actually, I think she's at home. Michele Wellman-Teeple. Michele, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Mitch. Good to be here.
And where are you, actually? Are you calling from home?
Yeah, I'm at home, which is right across the street from Bay Mills Community College.
Oh, you're pretty close.
Yeah.
All right, so we did talk to you after, this whole thing started. You let us know how things were kind of going there with the whole pandemic and the lockdown and stuff. Can you give us a little bit of an update on how things are going now?
Well, it's been, a roller coaster ride, like for everybody, I imagine. In the fall semester, we did start with face-to-face classes, but for the last few years, I've been opening a Zoom meeting for all the classes that I do up here in Bay Mills on the weekdays and then 5 weekends each semester. So for the students who didn't want to come for face-to-face, they had that option, even if they live right up the road, to attend on Zoom. So we've had a lot of people doing that who are close by, and then like people like you, and we've got 2 down by Detroit and 3 over by Hannahville. So we have students, and even one from Colorado, Zooming with us. And actually our numbers increased a little bit when students realized that they could Zoom. Then we had more people. We had some new people coming in, and then we had our students down in the lower peninsula by Harbor Springs, also registering for weekend classes there and for the weekday classes up here. So we had quite a few students Zooming all fall semester, and because our first speaker teachers all live in Sioux, Canada, or the vicinity, they haven't been able to freely come back and forth. For a while, they could come, but then they would have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and then that just didn't work for a class that's held weekly.
I think with the pandemic and lockdown and stuff, after this, people will be more prepared for things like this to happen. But I have to say, you guys seem like you were prepared for it before anybody even thought of it. You guys handled it pretty well.
Well, I think for my program, yeah. I mean, our other instructors and other programs and courses, some of them were struggling quite a bit. I think it's been especially challenging for the science instructors, to try and do labs. They had to pull together lab kits and that kind of thing, and then some students still up here. I feel like we have advanced technology because of being remote, but not everybody has the knowledge or the access.
Yep.
So then we had to, scramble for a few students for our program and for some of the other programs, and we were lucky. I think most colleges and universities got some form of COVID relief or assistance for students. So I forget how many now, maybe 4 students that I got hotspots for. I don't know if you've ever used a hotspot. You can do that on your phone, on some phones, so that creates a signal for you, or it connects to a tower somewhere. But the hotspot is a separate device, not in the phone, that you hook up to a laptop so you can get into the internet. And so that's how we have some of our students joining us now from Harbor Springs, because they're in a little... the signals were kind of patchy and not always great down there, so some of the students needed that so they could finish attending, and then they're still using those for this semester as well.
That's really cool. That's cool to see the technology coming into play here in the game in 2021 to help us revitalize the language and teach students, make things happen. And as I mentioned you were on the show before, but I guess we should catch some people up just in case they might not know or be familiar with the program. You teach language, the Anishinaabe language, through the Bay Mills Community College, and the program there is an immersion program. You teach a lot, and you use different tactics and things, and then there's also first speakers there that, why don't you tell us a little bit about the format of class, I guess, for students, prospective students that might not know.
Yeah, so it became a full-time program back in 2003, and the idea was that schools had been trying to teach language for maybe 20, 30 years in some places by that point, and still speakers were not being created. So we had other programs here, the language instructor program, which I also went through before that, and our first speaker instructor, Barbara Nolan, was getting, I think, a little frustrated as well and seeing that people weren't becoming speakers. So in those instructor programs, we were learning about the language, so we could talk about the grammar and all that kind of stuff, but to have conversation or to understand a fluent speaker who is speaking just naturally in conversation was not working. And so they did a lot of research, and they developed this, I call it the Panay immersion style. So when the first speakers are doing instruction, they stay in the language the whole time. During the lessons, they use what we call comprehensible input, which is basically visual cues and clues. Now on Zoom, most of the visual cues and clues are on a whiteboard, drawing pictures or using cutout pictures that they've laminated, and they still they're awesome storytellers, so they still, grab and keep our attention pretty good.
They're very theatrical. That's the word. They're theatrical.
So they're very good at also acting out things and using gestures and props. Whatever they have available, they can turn into props. And
another a factor to mention is they do make sure to throw like comedy in there. They're always looking to make people laugh and smile with their stories, even if they're talking about serious stuff sometimes. Yeah,
it's really, I think, the Anishinaabe way. We laugh through our tears, and that helps us cope and deal with emotionally difficult things. So, yeah, there's a lot of humor that gets interspersed into all of the stories. And what I like, too, is that they share so much of themselves, talking about their own experiences going through boarding school, going through, college education things, with their families growing up in fluent-speaking households. And then they'll tell us also Nana Bojo stories, so stories that are about our trickster hero, Wayna Bojo or Nana Bojo. Sometimes they call him Nana Bush. I don't know over in the west side what do they call him over there.
Nana Bojo is usually what we hear.
Yeah, so we hear a lot of those kinds of stories, especially in the wintertime. Some people are taught not to tell Nana Bojo stories in the, when there's not snow on the ground. So they'll tell us those kind of stories, and those are the stories that explain how certain animals or things came to be. Like there's stories about how the first snowshoes were made by observing the animals, and so a lot of the stories intersperse animals talking with each other and talking to humans, and Nana Bojo shape-shifting into different animals or things. And I think it also, those kinds of stories help those of us who didn't have the good fortune to grow up in a tribal community or in a fluent-speaking area. It helps us, figure out our Anishinaabe identity and strengthen it, and it sort of lifts us up in that way,
Yeah. So the way it usually works is they'll tell a story, and they do ask or cue for questions during the stories, but a lot of times the questions come at the end, and then you'll actually work as kind of a little bit of a translator back and forth once in a while. And actually, I think that's some of the best content is listening to you speak with them, because you'll speak with them in the language as well. But other than that, they don't. There's no homework or anything like that. You listen, and you interact almost like, even like a kid would ask a question about a certain story, like, what was this about, and what was that?
Mm-hmm. What I do like too is that it's part of our guiding principles as instructors and for the students, and I've come to include this like half a page of principles for all of them, for the students and the instructors, that we won't force students to speak the language, but we will stay in the language. We will encourage, others who want to only hear Anishinaabe to, for the other students who don't or can't use the language just yet, to try and minimize their use of English. But we also will accept answers in English. So I think that helps make the newer students comfortable.
I want to point something out, and I want to be harsh about it. One of the reasons that you guys do that is because for some students, they come in and there's kind of this pressure to speak, and it almost touches their ego if they can't say it the right way and stuff. But to learn the right way, that pressure can't really be there. So students coming in, you guys should get rid of that pressure right off the bat. Like especially, tribal people. If you're not qualified to learn your language, who is? You got to go in there ready to learn and ready to, really butcher the language a little bit learning it.
Yeah, and I've had different experiences learning other languages, and it was actually living in a different country and being surrounded by a different language that showed me that immersion does work, because the area that we were living in, it was over in Germany, was near the old East German border, and even the German people called that the frontier. And so there were not as many people. If you go to a big metropolitan city in Europe, you can find English-speaking people,
Yeah. That's kind of the way that I think of it, how I got over that fear myself of kind of saying the language. I'm picturing in my head that someday I am going to go to niche country and I'm going to have to communicate. And at that time, I'm not going to be worrying if I'm saying it right or wrong. I'm just going to be trying to communicate.
Yeah, and that's another thing, too, is our instructors, one of the other guiding principles is that if a student does, get to the point where they're trying to use the language, if they say something that's grammatically incorrect, a sympathetic listener, which is all of our instructors, they're all sympathetic to us trying to become speakers, or at least trying to gain understanding, they will just continue on if they understand what you're saying. If you say something factually incorrect, they won't say, that's wrong, and put that emotional, sort of block in your brain, that affective filter. They'll just restate what you said with the correct facts. So they model the correct thing to say in whatever the situation might be or whatever you might be trying to talk about. And then I think the students realize that that's what's going on, and I do that all the time, because I get excited, or I get my brain sort of short circuits when I'm trying to talk too fast, and I use the wrong tense, or I'll use the wrong verb form or something, verb conjugation, and they'll just restate it with the correct endings or whatever it might be. So,
do you think, I got a question for you, and this one just popped up, so that's why I'm asking it real quick. Do you think that the way that Western society's education is set up, where we're really, multiple choice, get it right, get this score, do you think that that is what causes a little bit of this insecurity when trying to learn a language?
I'm sorry, let me...
You know what I mean?
For a second. So you're asking about, like, the Western education way of...
in schools, there's a lot of pressure to get that test score, to get this right, to get that right, have your studying done and everything. It's kind of a big pressure. So then when you go to a language class, you can't do it that way. Do you think that that's one of the reasons it's tough for people to learn languages, because we're so used to that academic education style, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that does have something to do with it, and a lot of the newer students that have come into this program in the last couple of years, they'll ask, what books do I need, and that kind of thing, and well, we don't have any books, and they're like, what? And there's not usually homework assignments, but you mentioned at the beginning of our call that I use some different techniques, and I do that because I am not a first speaker, but I still try to look for methods that will help encourage speaking for the students, and also I try to get techniques that I can bring back to the classroom that I can use and stay in the language, and I think the students seeing me making mistakes and also seeing me doing something different, and it really, some of the techniques like the accelerated second language acquisition, which I know you are familiar with, and you helped me give me some, you gave me some sets of pictures that I could use for that. Those kinds of techniques, I think it helps the students seeing me, because I have to ask the teachers, and the teachers, even though they're all related, they're first cousins or sisters, they even have debates about the way to say things, because one has an Odawa parent and the other one has an Ojibwe parent, and so that's what they'll always talk about. And then there's Potawatomi mixed in there, so they just always laugh and talk about that when they're having a debate. And so I think I'm saying something right, and for one teacher I might be saying it right, but for the other one they're like, that sounds funny to me, this is how I would say it. So so they see me sort of working through that process, and I'm not, marking things down. I might write down how I hear them say stuff so that I have those, different ways of saying something, but it's not ever a thing of, that's wrong or that's right, or, you got 50% or you got 80% or something like that. Although I do have to say that for the college, we get our accreditation through the Higher Learning Commission, HLC, and they do want us to assess the program as a whole, because of the program being set up also where we have beginning students all the way through to six-year students all in the same classroom all at the same time. That's been a little bit of a challenge, and so I've been working at different things trying to figure out how to document our learners' progress without saying this is a test and you got to do this and you got to do that. I'll let people volunteer to go through certain exercises or activities with me, and that's how I see, find out what their comprehension level is, and even their speaking too, even though we aren't requiring students to speak.
Yeah, just measurements. Those measurements are important, and the Higher Learning Commission is there to make sure that everything's kind of being done in a good way, which, the fact that you guys are going through them just shows how good the program is, and you guys have some extra challenges there with that.
Yep.
So when it comes to some of the tactics that you use, and really I say tactics, but you actually play some some simple games when it comes to language, because those really work best in delivering the language. Like I know you do memory, and then what are some other things that you like to do with the class?
Well, this has been a little bit of a challenge because of the not being able to be face-to-face with the students, but we were doing other games. There is a game that was something like dominoes, but it used colors and shapes and position, so we could talk about if something was on top, below, in the middle, next to, that kind of thing, and then you can incorporate that into other activities that I would do where I would have the students, since we're not face-to-face, I can't bring them up to the board with me to go through those sets of pictures. So every now and then I'll just have one student, go through a whole set with me and then review and ask them to tell me, okay, where is, I'm trying to think now. No, I'm
Gotta create the scenario in your head.
Yeah. So I'll have 3 rows of pictures, 4 pictures in each row, and I'll say, okay, where is the makwa niba, and they can tell me, ishbiming or gidjiing, niwan, and we'll incorporate numbers in there too. Some of the students, I don't want to again put pressure on them. Some of them put pressure on themselves. They'll say, well, I'll tell you the number in Anishinaabe, and then I think, okay, that's good for you, but for the beginning student who doesn't know those numbers, that sort of adds an extra layer of challenge for them. And the idea is to have fun and enjoy what you're seeing and hearing and saying, and not to feel lost.
Yeah, and those scenarios too, it makes it so those people that are new kind of watch a little closer so they can see, well, did I get it right or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I think the competing and stuff is good for the language. I think one of the other things to point out for that is for people looking to learn the language, or maybe they know a little bit and want to take it to the next level, when you do play games like that, engage in the language like that, it makes it so you're not just memorizing it, but so you can use it. Because like we were talking about, if there was a niche country we can go to and we had to be in the language, you're going to have to communicate a certain concept or idea or whatever your intention is. And those games make it so you have to get your intention out there quickly to play the game.
Yep. Yeah, I like to do that, those kinds of games that encourage participation, and then some of the games that I used to play, because I taught at a charter school over in Sault Ste. Marie for 8.5 years, and I usually taught lower elementary kids. So especially for lower elementary kids, you don't want to play games where there's a winner or a loser, because that they don't have that concept yet, and it just breaks their heart when they lose. And so from that, I learned to try to do games that has everybody having to pay attention and including everybody, so you're not waiting, hopefully you're not waiting too long for your turn, or you can, volunteer to take a turn, or shout out an answer, or, in this case, hit your keyboard, your space bar, and say the answer that you think, or...
Hey, what is that, that's a shortcut for your microphone, or what?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I was just clicking the turn the mic on button. I'll have to remember that space bar thing. Actually,
I just learned it recently myself, so that's another thing too. With having to do this all on Zoom, I've learned some other technology things, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah, that's been a pro of this whole thing. A lot of people they've been forced to use technology and forced to learn it a little bit, and it's coming along. It's coming along. So let's talk a little bit. Well, I'm in the class on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and that runs from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. There's also weekend sessions, right?
Yep.
And then you also do a community class on Thursday that is also available on Zoom, right?
Yeah, I started doing free community classes. I tried doing one Thursday a month, and then I bumped it up to 2 Thursdays a month, and I was doing it over at the Culture Building. And so then that was another thing when I decided to try it on Zoom. I actually got a lot more attendance that way, because I've got nieces and nephews who live downstate that can't be here face to face with me, and so they are joining me on a regular basis. And then I think you join us once in a while, and then some of my friends from the area, and just it's a little more relaxed. I don't do the immersion style like we do for Panay, but I try to do games and a little bit more participatory stuff, and let them ask questions in English and not pressure, to speak. But I'm happy to see that even in there, the students are working at trying to pronounce things, and I don't force people to take notes or do worksheets or things like that, but that does help some people. Some people's learning style is to read and write, and that's when I was studying other languages, that's how I was taught, so you learn the alphabet and the sound system first, and how different consonant or vowel combinations are pronounced, and so...
Yeah. Really, it doesn't take too long to figure out that it's going to be a lifelong journey. It just is your way into it to get into that level or zone, I guess.
Yep.
All right, so speaking of class again, or your community class, for somebody then, if that's a perfect opportunity, if they're not quite ready to enroll for college credit, they can Zoom into your class on Thursday. What time does that run?
I've been doing it from 6:30 till 8 on Thursdays.
6:30.
First and third Thursdays of each month.
First and third Thursdays of each month. And how do they get the Zoom information if they'd like to attend your class and check it out?
You want the ID and the password? Is that what you're saying?
No, maybe not that, because is there a Facebook page they can find that at, or they can message you or something?
They could message me through Facebook. I do have a private group set up, because that was the other strange thing that happened when all the schools, K-12 schools and colleges and universities, switched to online learning and virtual learning. Then there came this thing called Zoom bombing. So one of the first community classes I did after I had just heard about Zoom bombing, and then it happened to us.
Oh, man.
And so there were three people doing it, and they were in weird places, which I can't figure out. Why would you want to Zoom bomb a little Anishinaabe language class?
Some people's kids. So
like when they're in Serbia, and one was down in a South American country somewhere, and they were somehow they were able to get in there and use like highlighter markers and draw inappropriate pictures and words, and we couldn't figure out how to boot them out. So I had to make it a private group. So yeah, if you're interested, then have them message me on Facebook, and I will give them a code and the password.
All right, very cool. And for those who don't know,
or invite them to the group. So.
And for people that might not be familiar with Zoom, it's super easy. You just go to Zoom, Google Zoom. There's a button there that says join a meeting, and then you would type in the numbers that Michele would give you, and then the password, and then you'd be brought into the page. You don't have to have a camera or microphone to actually listen into a Zoom. But if you want to participate, of course, you're going to need a microphone or a camera. And that'd be a pretty good way to kind of get your toes wet when it comes to learning language, right? That Thursday class?
I think so. I think I'd probably want to ask my students what they think, but I think they feel like that's been good for them, and they like it. They keep coming back, and I was talking with them in a recent class and saying, maybe once this is all over, somebody said, we should get together face-to-face when this is all done. I'm like, yeah, that would be nice. And I was feeling the loneliness of the pandemic at that point. It was had been 10 months or something, and I was just feeling lonely for face-to-face contact with somebody other than my husband and my daughter who live here. And one of my nieces in the class, she said, when I look back on all this crazy stuff with the pandemic, this is going to be a highlight for me. So that made me feel good. And it's the next best thing when you can't be face-to-face to be able to connect, in real time with people on Zoom or whatever other ways you might do it.
Yeah, like this. This is a nice little phone call conversation. I sit in the studio by myself most of the time, so thank you very much for the conversation.
Yeah, it's always good to talk with you.
I can't wait till we can get back to a time where we can have potlucks again. I can't go much longer without a good potluck.
Yeah, I know. It's been so weird not having, we do feasts every semester at the college, and then we do seasonal feasts here in the community, and so many communities have, not been able to do that. We've been doing our own offerings at those times, and the hardest thing and the weirdest thing for us, I think, has been funerals. I attended my first virtual funeral back in May.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, that seems so weird, like a live Zoom for a funeral.
Yeah, that's something I haven't experienced yet. I don't think that's a different one for me. Wow.
Yeah, and then, of course, the way we do traditional ceremonies with feasting and feeding the fire and taking care of the one who is making that journey, and doing pipe ceremonies with the community and the family, that's had to be cut way back and limited, and it's been really strange. Right now we're actually in the midst of a funeral here, my husband's first cousin, and he also happened to work at the college, and he just had a crazy life where he just did so many things. He was a Army paratrooper, Green Beret, Special Forces, and then he got into Secret Service through that, and then he came back home to Michigan and moved back home to Bay Mills. I don't know that he was born and raised here, but he spent time here off and on when he was a kid. Yep. And then he's been living back in the community for, I don't know, probably close to 30 years. And he's the first person that I know this close to our family who COVID's what got him.
Oh, okay. So he fell to COVID, man.
Yeah. Yep. He's the first resident of Bay Mills that passed from that. We've had, in the UP, I think over here it's been pretty good, and in Bay Mills, the chairman and the council, they've been super careful and really taken as many and more restrictions into our area as they can humanly do with the support of government agencies and things, and just when we felt like, oh, we got the vaccinations coming in now, and I don't know how it happened. Who knows where the contact actually occurs when people get that illness, but yeah, that was
yeah, man, it's crazy how it's gone. And I thought people seemed to think it was going to end with when 2021 got here, but it's still here. So let's end this off with a couple of fun ones. I'll ask you a couple of questions that I've been asking some others.
Okay.
During the lockdown, what's been your go-to lockdown food or lockdown snacks?
Lockdown food.
Yeah, or like what have you been making for dinner a lot because I don't feel like cooking, I'm going to make this again.
Actually, it's forced me to cook a lot more because when it was just me and my husband here, we would go to the restaurants several nights a week and then do leftovers and stuff. So I've been making a lot of things with just mostly ground beef. I hate to admit it, but we are red meat. We call ourselves meatitarians here. So I've been making lots of meatloaf and hamburger gravy and all these comfort foods. But one thing we do a little different, some of those things that have gravy or things with them. Oh, yeah, so we'll get boxes of frozen beef tips and gravy from Schwann's. So that's a quick, easy go-to thing. You just nuke it for 5 minutes 3 times in a row, and then so we'll use oatmeal instead of potatoes because we tell ourselves that oatmeal is healthier. And I don't know, oatmeal with salt and pepper and in a savory way is something that I did not grow up with. I couldn't believe it when I moved up here and people were eating oatmeal like they would eat grits or mashed potatoes or something.
Is it pretty good or what?
Yeah.
Huh. I'll have to give that a shot. What about lockdown hobbies? Have you picked up any new hobbies or pastimes during this time? I've been doing a lot of crocheting over the years. Actually, starting in the Panay program as a student is what got me into crocheting because they didn't want us taking notes, and I must be ADD or something because I can't just listen, so I have to be doing something with my hands. It helps my brain engage better. So I've crocheted, I don't know how many baby blankets. We've had a little baby boom going on. Yeah.
Surprise. So I've made, I don't know, 4 or 5 baby blankets, and then I started branching off into other patterns. And then I always have lots and lots and lots of old junk mail that I need to sort through and shred. So I've been trying to get at that. But I still got boxes of it in my garage. When I get busy on something like a master's degree or when we're traveling a lot for work or ceremony, then those things just get put aside. Yep. And they're there when I come back, so I've been back trying to get at them.
Yeah, always waiting those little chores like that.
Yeah.
All right, so last one then. What are you most looking forward to when the world gets back, if it gets back to normal-ish? What are you looking forward to the most?
I am most looking forward to being face-to-face with my family again. I grew up down in the Detroit area, and most of my siblings are still down there, and I have one daughter who lives down in Lansing and works at MSU, and that has been the hardest thing, is not being able to see my family. And even our family up here, I live in my husband's home community, and I can't remember when I saw his sister face-to-face. We've done little things where one sister organized a meal, and we each did side dishes, so she went around and picked up all the side dishes and dropped off everybody else's, and then she went back around to, get everybody else's side dishes that she picked up later back to the first people. So we've done things like that. So I've seen his one sister a few times that way, but it'll be nice to be able to sit together and have a meal and just visit and have a laugh, because most of the things we do now is via text or phone call and whatever's necessary kind of a thing, not just a visit.
All right, so do you have any last words for the listeners or anybody who might want to know more about BMCC?
You can look me up at the bmcc.edu website if you want to know more about the Panay program. I've put together a little package that I'll send out to people who are interested, and my email is mwellman@bmcc.edu, all lowercase. And if you're interested in other language classes, we have other kinds of language classes and other programs. We are even offering a bachelor's degree in early childhood education now. So there's lots to do through BMCC, and everything can be done virtually, online, and hopefully soon everybody can be back to in person that wants to be.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much for calling in today, and I'll see you later for class.
All right, Mitch. Miigwech.